Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where in the world you are joining me from. I am Illuminati, and this is the Crypto and Cognac podcast show, as always, live every Thursday evening, 7 p.m. sharp, Atlantic Standard Time, right here on YouTube. And as always, we are keeping the wheels of knowledge lubricated with some Henny, some Hennessy, some Hen Dog, however you want to call it. Cheers. And every week I say, depending on where in the world you are joining me from, and wherever that is, I hope you are safe this week. We here in the Caribbean have been bruised, battered, stressed out, frustrated by Madame Beryl as she made her way through the Caribbean. She's just about past us now, and we are left to clean up the pieces. So let's get to it. Today, as always, I have to remind you, this is not a financial advisory podcast. I am not a financial advisor, right? Nothing that I share here any evening should be misconstrued as financial advice. This is all about the ICE rule: information, conversation, education. I share with you, you share with me, and maybe on the other side of that, we are a little bit wiser for wear, right? This evening, so a few things have been happening in the crypto space. If you haven't been paying attention, you've seen us dip back under 60,000 after reaching an all-time high of 73,000. Most of that price action has been due to the fact that Germany has been heavily selling some Bitcoin that they would have seized previously. And that dumping onto the market has been significantly impacting market conditions and market price. Now here, we try not to focus too heavily on price action. We're here to talk about the space. We're here to talk about the technology. We're here to talk about the benefits, about the utility. And that action by the German government has created some discourse in the space, especially in some of the groups that I'm in, as to whether or not we really want these nation states, these large multinational institutions, to adopt this technology, this innovation, this currency, and whether or not that is what we, the participants in the space, the people who've been around for a while, whether or not that's what we really want. And is it good for us? Is it not good for us? Which is better for us? And that is why today I decided we're going to talk a little bit about adoption. You guys know every single week I say, not even every single week on the podcast, but all the time I say adoption is inevitable. But I think there's a key difference between adoption and acceptance, right? And I think sometimes we get those ideas conflated. And that's why today, particularly, I wanted to discuss not just the differences, but what does either of these look like as we look down the road? Because ultimately, Bitcoin's potential growth and utility will obviously be discussed through the lens of either adoption or acceptance. And I think both perspectives are integral in understanding the overall trajectory of this industry and obviously its impact on the overall global financial landscape, right? So first of all, let's identify what each means, right? So adoption basically refers to the increased use of Bitcoin by individuals, businesses as a medium of exchange, a store of value, a unit of account, a unit of exchange. And this perspective emphasizes Bitcoin's original intention, right? The original ethos of Bitcoin was that of a decentralized peer-to-peer currency that operates independently of traditional financial systems, right? That cannot be controlled, that cannot be monitored by any centralized entity, whether government, institution, or otherwise. Meanwhile, now Bitcoin acceptance involves the integration of Bitcoin into the traditional financial ecosystem, where basically it coexists and interacts with the existing financial institutions, the regulatory frameworks of the world, and obviously the financial infrastructures of the world. Now, while those two things may look the same in terms of number of people that have access to, I guess, the information about Bitcoin, I think those two things are almost geometrically opposed to each other. I think obviously the ideas of Bitcoin adoption and Bitcoin acceptance often find themselves in conflict because each one has different priorities, different motivations, different requirements, right? So I wanted to first kind of look at each of them and what each of them specifically addresses, like how they are juxtaposed, how they measure up against each other, and go through those, right? So I've made my list and I'm gonna check it twice. So first of all, adoption, we just mentioned it, references, decentralization, right? So Bitcoin was designed to be decentralized with no central authority controlling it, right? And decentralization is a core principle of Bitcoin, and especially for the users who value that independence, that self-governance, that individual financial sovereignty, right? And those people who are absolutely, what is the right word? I don't want to say against, but those people who are absolutely wary of corporate controls. Again, it goes back to the original creation of Bitcoin. It was formed out of the devastation of the global financial crash in 2008. What happened in Wall Street, what happened with the subprime mortgage ecosystem, and how that affected and infected the regular person, us, right? Not the people in Wall Street. How the government had to step in to bail out certain banks, and what the executives of those banks ultimately did with that bailout money, paying themselves huge bonuses. So I think Bitcoin's original idea is formed out of the fact that we, in all previous instances of life, we have found that it is very hard to trust centralized control, right? So again, on one side, as we talk adoption, we have decentralization. Now, on the other side, when we talk about acceptance, we are talking about what is inherently a centralized system, because the traditional financial system is inherently centralized, right? It requires regulatory oversight, centralized management, institutional control, and of course, integrating Bitcoin into these systems often necessitates a level of centralization that conflicts with the original ethos of Bitcoin, right? So again, decentralization on the side of adoption and acceptance on the side of centralization, or centralization on the side of acceptance, right? Then we have the juxtapositioning of adoption versus acceptance as it relates to anonymity versus regulatory compliance, right? Many Bitcoiners, many people who adopt Bitcoin value the pseudonymous nature of Bitcoin transactions. Now, everything is on the blockchain. Everything is there for anyone to see. Anybody can verify it. Anybody has access to view the blockchain, to interact with the blockchain. But it does allow a level of privacy and I guess discretion as it relates to financial dealings that we are not used to in the traditional financial system, right? As Bitcoin becomes more and more integrated into the traditional financial ecosystem, it must comply with the regulatory requirements. We've seen that KYC, know your customer, AML or anti-money laundering policies. We've seen most recently CZ and Binance falling afoul of those KYC and AML policies in the US, resulting in huge fines for Binance, some jail time for CZ. We've seen, I mean, I don't want to compare what happened with FTX in that vein, because at the end of the day, that was something totally different. That was fraud outright. But always we are seeing, again, that tug and pull between adoption and acceptance, right? On the next side, we're talking about Bitcoin adoption, we're talking about innovation. And then on the other side, with Bitcoin acceptance, we're talking about stability, right? We're talking about the fact that a lot of people feel uncertain about participating in this market because of the level of volatility, right? So Bitcoin community often pushes for rapid innovation, right? Not just Bitcoin, but the cryptocurrency industry as a whole, the blockchain industry as a whole. So implementing new technologies, new protocols. We are building things fast. We are breaking things fast. And you know, we see how dangerous that could be with hacks, with people doing nefarious things. But as we try to balance that innovation with, you know, enhanced functionality, enhanced security, enhanced scalability, that innovation needs to happen, I think, in a space where people have the freedom to experiment. And I think, you know, one of them, I always say I'm an advocate for regulatory compliance as it relates to onboarding the masses, because not everybody is as knowledgeable, is as aware, or even cares to be as involved in this space as we are. And we need things to be put in place to protect those people. But I think those regulations have to come with a level of flexibility that allows innovation not to be stifled, right? But on the other side, right, the traditional financial institutions, they prioritize stability, they prioritize risk management, or at least they talk about it, right? We're not going to go into that, but that from the outside looking in, that's what they really favor. So their adoption may be, you know, a bit reluctant while they see this technology evolving, right? So again, like I said, on one side, innovation, on one side, stability. We talk about, on the same vein as innovation and stability, we have to talk about volatility and predictability, right? So we've seen crazy market movements, right? We're in the middle of one, like I just said, 73,000 down now to 50, I think 58,000. We who are in the crypto space, we are comfortable with 10-20% market corrections over, you know, a couple of days, a couple of weeks. in traditional financial markets, 1 or 2% movement in any which direction is mind blowing. So obviously, they like to be able to predict what is happening in the market, what is going to happen. The regulators like to have that ability to predict the market so that they can do planning. Governments like to be able to predict what is going to happen so that they could implement monetary policy. So again, pulling and tugging. Now, as it relates to adoption versus accessibility, again, we have to talk about, on one side with adoption, we're talking about accessibility, right? So Bitcoin aims to provide financial access to everyone, right? Once you have access to the internet, and sometimes without even having access to the internet, you can participate in the Bitcoin ecosystem, in the Bitcoin blockchain. And you don't even need to have hundreds of millions of dollars or even thousands of dollars. If you have $1, you could start participating. And this is especially key for the unbanked and underbanked population of the world. We've talked about this over and over and over, right? And the ability for people to be able to transact without the need of an intermediary who they have to trust. And on the other side of that, that is what the traditional financial system is built on. It's built on institutional control, right? It's built on intermediaries. It's built on institutions of trust, banks and brokers and payment processors, right? So integrating Bitcoin into these systems often involves intermediaries, right? Even we here in this space know that most of the, if not all of the failures, fraud, mishaps, misappropriations that we've experienced in this industry has been due to intermediaries, right? So whether those are centralized exchanges, whether those are bridging protocols and bridging platforms, whether those are DeFi platforms, but those are the systems that the traditional financial system is very, very familiar with, right? So again, we have accessibility being juxtaposed against institutional control. On the other side, as the same with accessibility, same with innovation, same with the decentralization idea, we have the idea of open source community, right? And Bitcoin development has been driven, and crypto development and blockchain development has been driven primarily by open source community that value that idea of transparency, that idea of collaboration, that idea of doing things for the public good. On the other side of that, we have a battle with, I guess, for corporate interests, right? Now, this is a huge talking point, especially as we are in the midst of the US election campaigning system. We are in the midst of multiple global conflicts, and we keep hearing certain corporate interests keep coming up who have been financing presidential campaigns, who have been financing politicians, who have been manipulated things behind the curtain to have things happen the way they want it to happen. Because at the end of the day, corporate interests, they tend to prioritize profit, right? Not the public good, right? They prioritize profits, proprietary technology, so not open source, and of course, competitive advantage. And so again, completely opposite to how this industry has traditionally been built. Again, grassroots movement, this open source community. A lot of the people who are the wealthiest people in this space are people who adopted this thing when it was nothing, right? When it was just literally magic internet, nerd money, and it built itself from that grassroots movement, gaining traction all the way. People, starting when it was since 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizza, and gaining traction and community support and individual adoption all the way up to this point that it is, right? But over the last few years, particularly, I would say since maybe even before DeFi summer, maybe all the way back to 2017, during that what do we call it, the pre-sale IDO period, ICO, sorry, we saw a lot more institutional adoption. And institutional adoption, for those of us who come from the corporate space, come from working with big organizations, especially in the financial space, we know about that top-down approach, negotiating with regulators, policymakers, corporate executives, and that institutional involvement can dilute, right, the nature of Bitcoin's growth and shift the focus towards more meeting institutional needs, right? We have celebrated all these companies, these payment processors, these Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, all these people getting involved, the micro strategy and all these people getting involved. But how is that adoption potentially going to impact what has been built thus far in this industry, right? And then, it comes all the way back to, are we going to sacrifice this thing that we've built to get away from all the issues that scared us into having this thing created, that scared Satoshi so much that he who created this technology, that we run towards this financial integration becoming accepted by this traditional financial space, where we sacrifice our economic sovereignty, right? That ability for individuals to have full control over their financial assets without interference, right? Excuse me. So which part is the right part? Is it adoption? Is it acceptance? Which part do you think leads to the dream that Satoshi envisioned for Bitcoin in the first place? Is it simply choosing one or the other? Is it a combination of the both? I think the future of Bitcoin hinges on a delicate balance between adoption and acceptance. I mean, widespread adoption can democratize financial systems, providing alternatives to traditional financial banking for millions of people worldwide, right? But meanwhile, acceptance within the traditional financial ecosystem can legitimize Bitcoin to the point where it allows for a greater level of stability, a greater level of integration, and maybe a greater level of adoption. So for me, it's a double-edged sword, and I think it's up to us to decide which one which side of the sword we're gonna sharpen more. I think adoption, definitely for me, is the way to go. I think education is key. That's why I'm here every week, to get people to take control of their own financial opportunities, to take custody of their own financial futures, to educate themselves around, you know, all the things, and not just put blind faith into institutions. But it's a double-edged sword, like I said. You know, we do need some regulations, because not everybody is going to be willing to invest the time, the energy, going to have the capacity for the knowledge around this space. And I think ultimately we have to stop focusing so much on number go up, number go down, I'm going to be rich, go to the moon, when Lambo, all these different things, and really focus in on protecting the integrity of what the thought process that initially brought this thing into existence. Shout out to Stephen, Onika, Anil, Taylor, everybody in the chat. That's me monologuing, and even get to really drink my drink. Guys, this is my last week, not of the podcast, of course, but my last week in this year of life. When I see you guys next, I will have another digit added to my age. And the grays are coming in to show it. So cheers to you guys. As always, it's my pleasure to be here with you. And as always, as I say every week, every day, holy faith, adoption is inevitable. Illuminati out. Be blessed. Cheers.